Hi everyone, I'm so excited about the topic of today because this can turn average people like you and me into wealthy people. Now, this is not a get rich quick scheme, it is rather a get rich slowly but surely scheme. I'm talking about compound interest. It might not sound sexy, but it is very powerful. Exactly how powerful? I will show you that today with some concrete examples based on real dividend stocks. And compound interest is also not some hidden secret either, because as you can see here, it is even discussed on websites like Business Insider and also on CNBC.com. So today I will explain you the concept of simple interest with an example, and after that the concept of compound interest with the same example, just to give you an idea of how compound interest works. I will show you a concrete example of compound interest with dividends with my calculator. I will show you what the difference is between a simple dividend and a compound dividend and what the difference in returns looks like. I'll also show you how you can speed up the compounding effect, or in other words the snowball effect. I will also discuss why I think this is one of the reasons why the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. And lastly, I will give you an update on my portfolio on both my brokers. So first a little update on my portfolio. As you can see, the unrealized gains are now at 2.4% this year, and the total since start is around 34-35% now, and the gap between S&P and my portfolio has widened a bit. And if we go to 2020, we can see there was actually quite a lot of volatility at the end of January and beginning of February, and that was mainly due to the coronavirus. But I'm not too worried about those short-term fluctuations because my focus is on dividends. And then if we go to my other portfolio on the Giro, this one has come down quite a bit because the purchase in this account SKT, which is the only holding as of this moment, and down by almost 10% as you can see. But again, I'm not too worried about that because I'm receiving dividends, and you can actually see here at the bottom that the first dividend is already coming in. It's not yet in my account, but I can see it already. And I expect that over the long term the price will go up again. But like I said, short term I don't care and I'm not worried about it, since I think the fundamentals are fine. And then an overview of my whole portfolio combined in Google Sheets. Unfortunately, the dividend information is not pulling at the moment, so I cannot show you that. But you can see at the bottom the value is now at a little over $10,000, and the change in percentage without dividends is 27.6, and with dividends it's at 35.6. And as you can also see here, the only two in the red now are SKT, and CVS also went down a bit again. So that one is down as well, based on my cost basis. On the dividend front, there's not much news, since there's not been any new dividend payments coming in. So I won't have anything to add to that today. And now on to the juicy part of this video. First we'll talk about simple interest, and then I'll also explain compound interest. So simple interest is basically you receive interest on your principal and you're not reinvesting that. So the interest you receive in dollars or euros will be constant over time and will not increase unless the interest increases. So as you can see here, let's suppose you have 10,000 in the bank and you receive 1% interest, which is actually pretty low at the moment with the current interest rates. The current interest rates are more around like 0% at the moment. So in that case you receive 100 each time. So let's say Each 100 bill is 1 year. So you'll receive 100 in the first year, 100 in the second year, 100 in the third, 100 in the fourth, and 100 in the fifth year. And if we then go on to compound interest, you will see the difference. And the difference here won't be so big because the amount is small and the interest component is also small. But it's just to give you an example. I will give you a more concrete example about different stocks after this. So again, you have 10,000 in the bank, you receive 1% interest. In the first year, you'll receive 100, but in the second year, you reinvest that 100 you received in interest back into the bank. So your principal will actually grow to 10,100. Then you receive 1% over that, and you'll receive 101. If you then again reinvest it, you will get 102 in the third year, 103 in the fourth year, and 104 in the fifth year. And you can see that it's steadily growing. And actually, that's also the point of compound interest. It takes time. It's not a get rich quick scheme, like I said. It's a get rich slowly but surely scheme, and I'll show you after this why. So I found this article on Business Insider with the title "These 3 charts show the amazing power of compound interest." And at the beginning they already explain here, one of the biggest financial advantages out there is something anyone can access by opening a simple retirement account. Compound interest. Actually, it doesn't even have to be a retirement account, it can just be an investment account. And in this article they explain compound interest as compound interest occurs when the interest that accrues to an amount of money in turn accrues interest itself. So basically, when you reinvest the interest, you'll receive interest over that interest. Article also shows an important point with illustrating it with 3 examples. So they have 3 people. Susan, who invests for only 10 years early in her career, and she ends up with more wealth than another saver, Bill, who saves for 30 years later in life. By starting early, Susan was able to better take advantage of compound interest. And Chris, the third saver, is the ideal saver. He contributed steadily for his entire career. And then they have here a graph which shows the difference. So the top one is Chris, who was saving early and steadily. And then Susan, who started early and then stopped and it was still growing. And then Bill, and actually I can see now that the graph is not entirely accurate because the starting age of Bill and Susan is the same, which it shouldn't be because it says here at the top that Susan started investing 5,000 annually between the age of 25 and 35. So in total she invests 50,000, and Bill invests 5,000 annually between the ages of 35 and 65. In total he invests 150,000. But Bill ends up with 540,000, almost 541, and Susan ends up with 602,000, even though she only invested for 10 years. And Chris ends up with over a million because he invested 5,000 annually between the age of 25 and 65, and he invested a total of 200,000. Now, let me pause the video here so you can fully grasp the concept that's being explained here. So even if Susan only invests 5,000 a year for 10 years, she will end up with 602,000. So in other words, if she would only invest between the age of 25 and 35 and would blow all her other money, except reinvesting that 50,000 that she originally invested, she would still end up with 602,000. So even though she wouldn't invest any more money after that, she would be flat broke, for example, she would still end up with 602,000 at the age of 65. So that's very important to understand, and it's very important that you start early. Like the graph shows here, Bill is investing 100,000 more, but because he started 10 years later, he will still end up with less money than Susan. fundamental to the concept of compounding because time is your friend. And in this graph you can actually also see that if you start investing at the age of 20 and you invest a monthly amount of 361 and you ramp it up and you'll be investing 14,000 and something at the age of 60, you'll get to 1 million at the retirement age. And this is exactly why the saying is valid. Time in the market is more important than timing the market. And as you can see clearly here, the longer you are invested in the market and the longer you are reinvesting your dividends, bigger the chance that you can let compounding do its work. And now on to the compound dividend calculator I made. This was actually based on the compound dividend calculator of PPC Ian, but I extended it a bit and I enhanced it. So what I can do here is I can just enter a ticker. Let's say I'll enter V from Visa. And I have to adjust the dividend growth rate myself, also the capital appreciation rate I expect, but you can play around with that. And the reason I don't import that is because it's a guess and you cannot base it on the results of the past. So I'm taking a very safe approach here with a dividend growth rate of 10% over the next 10 years, while Visa is I think over 20% dividend growth rate in the last 10 years and only capital appreciation of 7%. And you can see the dividend is already calculated based on the ticker I entered, and the share price, that's the current share price, is also pulled. And for the number of shares I entered 10 shares, but you can adjust it any way you like, of course. And what you can see here is that after 10 years the simple dividend, so that's the dividend that's not reinvested, is at 31 and the compound dividend is at 32, so not a big difference yet. But if we go down and if we go to 30 years, for example, you can see that the compound dividend is at 274 and the simple dividend is at 209. Now this might not seem like a big difference, but this is only 10 shares. The dividend growth rate is actually pretty modest. If I adjust it a bit, let's say it's at 14%, then you can see already the gap widening. You can see here after 30 years, instead of 611 simple dividend, it's over 1000 in compound dividends. Now let's change it to 100 shares so you can better see. So that would be an investment of over 20,000. And you can see after 10 years the gap is not so big yet. And I also added two columns actually where you can see the year-on-year difference in received dividends from the compounding effect and the year-on-year difference dollars. And you can see after 10 years difference is not so big. Compared to the previous year we received 63 more dollars. If we then go to 20 years you can already see the gap widening. You can see that it's at 1650 almost for simple dividends and at almost 2100 for compound dividend. And you can see that the difference between the previous year and the 20th year is almost $300 already annually. And you can see that it's increasing and increasing. And if we then go to 30 years, you can see that the amount of received dividends with simple dividends, so no reinvestment, is 6100, a bit over 6100. But the compound dividend a little over 10,000, and you can also see the difference here is more than $1,500 compared to the last year. So it's really increasing. And if you go down even further, now I know not everyone has that kind of time horizon, but I just want to show you that the compounding effect gets stronger and stronger. So after 40 years, you can see the difference is huge. It's 22, a bit over 22,500 for simple dividends, so no reinvestment, and if you reinvest, it's at 63,500, and you can see here that the difference with the previous year is more than 11,000. Now again, to really bring this point home, let's rewind a bit. So we made an investment, an initial investment of $20,000 in Visa, and after 40 years, we would receive 63,000 in dividends. So that's 3 times the initial investment, and you can also see in the amount that it's increasing with, it's almost increasing by half of the amount of the original investment. So that's really huge, and you can also see if you go down lower, that actually it surpasses the initial investment just by the amount it increases every year. So the dividends you receive every year, it's increasing by more than the initial amount after 43 years, and that is really the compound effect kicking in. And like I said before, this is only the initial investment of 20,000. So if you would blow all your money during the rest of your life, but you would keep reinvesting that 20,000, you would end up with this kind of cash flow after 40 years. So imagine what would happen if you have multiple investments like this. Then you really have a great side income as cash flow, and actually it can be your main income. If we then go to graph it out, we can see the difference even more clearly. So here on the left, you have a graph of the simple dividend and the compound dividend, with the compound dividend being the red line after 50 years, and you can really see that the gap is widening quite a lot. After like 45 years, you can see it's going almost straight up, and that's because it's growing exponentially instead of linearly. And then if we go to the 30 years, you can already see it here because the legend is a bit smaller. You can see more clearly that there's already a difference starting to appear after 20 years, and after 30 years it's quite big as well. So if you then graph it like this, you can see where again red is compound and blue is simple, the difference. You can see after like 30 years, yeah, it's not so clearly on this graph, but you can better see it on the graph here below. After 30 years, you can see that it's not yet double, but it's like 40 to 50% more after 30 years. So let's take another example. I'll take 3M, ticker MMM. I'll adjust the growth rate a bit, let's say 8%. And capital appreciation, let's put it a bit lower. The lower the capital appreciation is, the more the compounding effect will occur, because you can reinvest the dividends at a cheaper share price. Dividend profile of this company is quite different because the starting dividend is a lot higher. The yield is at almost 3.7 now, and the share price as of today is 162. And if we then take a look after 10 years, for example, we will receive 1243 with no reinvestment, and when it's compounded, so with reinvestment, it is at almost 1850. Again, you can see the difference here in dollars. It's after 10 years, the difference between the 9th and the 10th year is $211. If we then go again to 30 years, we can see an even more substantial gap between not reinvesting and reinvesting the dividend. So you can see here that it's a few $100 under 6,000, and compounded it's at almost 29,000, and you again can see the difference compared to the previous year. It's more than 4,000, it's more than 4,100. Again, let that sink in. After lump sum investment a bit more than 16k, you would have more in cash flow after 30 years. So you would have like a bit under 2 times that in cash flow after 30 years. And if you keep reinvesting, that will only grow and grow over the time span of the reinvestment. So again, even if you didn't invest any more money, you would end up with this kind of cash flow after 30 years. So that's really the power of compounding, and that's really something you have to wrap your head around, because this is how people get wealthy. And then if we go to the graph again you can see, and the gap is even starting to widen already earlier because the starting dividend is bigger, so the reinvestment value of the dividend is bigger, so the principal will grow faster in the beginning. So as you can see, this is not a get rich quick scheme, but this can definitely get you very, very wealthy if you are patient and you start early. And there's a saying that the best time to invest was 20 years ago and second best time is today. So don't hesitate to invest. You should just start investing today and not tomorrow or the day after or next year, because that will lose you precious time which you cannot make up later anymore. And what you also have to remember is that the amount in dividends here in these examples is without any added capital. So it's purely a beginning investment of, in the case of 3M, 16,200 with 100 shares. But after 30 years, you will have a dividend income of 28,000, almost 29,000. And that is without any additional investment. That's purely the compounding effect. So there are actually ways to speed this up, and I have previously wrote a few blog articles about that on my website, dividendattitude.com, and ways to speed it up are pretty obvious, but nonetheless it's good to mention. One way is to lower your expenses, and I list here a few ways to do that. Like here is the list that I went through myself. So I took a look at my health insurance, and that's a bit different per country, of course. But I compared my health insurance with other health service providers, and I found a cheaper way. And I looked at my energy bill, my gym subscription, etc., etc. And that alone, going through all my subscriptions and insurance and everything, saved me 906 euros annually, and that's 906 euros that I can invest additionally on top of my regular investments. And the other way to speed up the compounding effect is to increase your income. So in this blog post I listed some ways I want to increase the income myself, from regular salary increases, from dividend income, and from starting up a business, and also from rental income, which is in the works already. So I made some assumptions here, and I would end up with 2000, a little over 2000 extra to invest per month. If I would have a business income of 1000 and income from the rental property of 400, and from my salary 600, and from dividends 42 on a monthly basis. Now if I would add that all together with the cost savings, I would have an extra 900,200 to invest extra in a year, and I would have a total of 27,300 to invest. And I calculated here in this article that if I used a initial investment of 5,000, a dividend growth of 5%, a starting yield of 3.5% with a duration of 20 years. So that's not even when the real compounding is kicking in, and an inflation rate of 1%. and share price appreciation of only 4%, that I would have portfolio value of well over 1 million, so 1.386 million actually, and annual dividends of 56, almost 56,500. So as you can see, that can really add up over time. And of course, these are all assumptions, but this shows you that with some hard work, you can really generate a lot of wealth using the compounding effect. So I hope this will really inspire you to start investing as soon as you can and as early as you can. And remember, it's never too late. This has actually inspired myself as well when I did these calculations and I made this calculator, because I can really see more for myself that with compounding I can really generate a lot of wealth that I can even pass on to the next generation. And I'm not even that old. I'm beginning 30, so I still have a lot of years to make my money work for me. And then lastly, why I think the compounding effect is actually widening the gap between the poor and the rich. And well, this article is quite political, and I won't go into that, but I do want to show you something in this article. They have a thought experiment in this article where they state that on a Pacific island there's 3 rich people which have a fortune of 5,000 each, while the other 1,000 residents have only 100 each. The combined wealth is 115,000 of the whole island, and then due to economic growth, the total wealth of the island's residents doubles to 230,000. The wealth of the 3 rich people triples to 15,000 each. They now own a total of 45,000 between them, and the wealth of the 1,000 poor residents grew 85% to 185. Now, there was a bigger increase for the 1,000 poor residents, but in terms of cash, the 3 rich people gained 10,000 each to 15,000, and the poor people only gained 85. And that is because of the compounding effect. Because they have a bigger capital to start with, they can compound their money faster, and that's why their money grows faster than in a dollar amount than the 1,000 poorest residents. So the gap has widened considerably. So you have to understand that with dividend growth stocks, it's not only the reinvestment, but it's also that the reinvestment grows and that the amount in simple dividends you receive is also growing. So it's both growth of the dividend itself and the growth of the principal, which in turn turns into more dividends. So it's 2 components that is really helping accelerate the compounding effect. So the dividend growth rate and the fact that you're reinvesting those dividends back into the principal, which in turn gives you more shares of the same company while you're not reinvesting any additional capital. And all of that combined will lead to almost 29,000 in dividends after 30 years with only an investment of 16,200. Now if you have any questions or comments, please leave a comment below the video. Please don't forget to like this video, and also don't forget to subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the subscribe button right below the video. And also don't forget to turn the notifications on by clicking on the little bell next to the subscribe button, so you will get a notification every time I post a new video. Until then, see you next time. Bye bye.